I was having Yasha, but Rico from RicoScores, and I know I ended up really busy today, so I know the one and only video that I'm coming out with is coming out late, and I'm trying to get back to doing at least 2 videos a day, but schedule just been a little crazy. But either way, we're here after I've really gone and watched some film on the guy. We're here to break down why the Washington Commanders not only drafted offensive lineman Brandon Coleman 67th overall in the 3rd round, but also why they view him as a left tackle. We're going to talk about his potential as a guard. We're going to talk about his potential as a left tackle. I'm going to give you his ceiling comp. We're going to break down why he does have future Pro Bowl potential for sure. And we're going to talk about why he may even be the steal of the draft. I'm going to give my breakdowns, weaknesses, strengths. Of course, we got to look at his athleticism. And I'm going to also give you some notes that a lot of professionals have on his breakdown as well. Some offensive line coaches, some draft analysts, everywhere. So you're going to get a lot of opinions, a lot of breakdowns in this video. But before we dive into all of that, make sure you stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, and stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Make sure you stay tuned for all of the content, and I'm keeping y'all updated on all of the social media platforms. We Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, you know what I'm saying? Make sure you follow all of those pages as well. And I'm working through all of these draft picks. Next up, of course, is going to be Ben Sinnott. Then we have Mike Sanders still, and then Johnny Newton, and then we can start doing film sessions for the draft picks, and I can do my full review of the entire draft, my grade, all of that type of stuff. So make sure you stay tuned for all of that. But instead of wasting more of y'all time, let's go ahead and get to this video, man. Let's get it. Adam. And I'm not gonna lie, when we first was there at the pick 67th overall, I was thinking maybe like Caden Wallace can make sense if you're trying to go for floor. But Brandon Coleman easily had the way higher ceiling as far as options there with that pick. And like I keep talking about and keep bringing up in a lot of different videos and live streams, we went and signed a bunch of free agents. We signed the most free agents out of any team out of the entire NFL for a reason, so that we can go into this draft with the freedom to take higher ceiling, best player available guys like this. Even though we don't have like a true dependable starting left tackle, we're going to definitely talk about that throughout this video. But I still love the philosophy in the pick of, instead of playing it safe and getting the Caden Wallace at a position of need, because we just feel like we just need a guy, just somebody serviceable. They may never live up to being a Pro Bowler, but we just need somebody that's okay right now. I hate that thought process. I love the idea and the fact that Adam Peters chose to go with the ceiling in Brandon Coleman. Now, comp-wise, like I always say, I'm going to always give you the comps towards the beginning of the video, so that while we're talking about everything about this guy, weaknesses, strengths, athletic profile, stats, all of that type of stuff, grades, I want you to have this ceiling comp in mind. And I keep emphasizing ceiling comp because I'm not saying that this is literally who he's definitely gonna be. I got money on it. But if everything works out, if he reaches his ceiling, which is not, of course, very likely, but if he does, that's the ceiling. And like I've already talked about in a previous video of one of the draft picks, maybe it was Jordan McGee, maybe it was Luke McCaffrey, but I basically explained, long story short, I like to do ceiling comps also because most people try to give like a realistic comp. I understand why draft analysts try to give a realistic comp, because their reputation is on the line as far as if they're right or wrong about certain prospects. I'm just here to give you what he could be at his best, what the Commanders' vision of this guy potentially is, and what he looks like he could potentially be as far as a ceiling goes is literally Joe Thuney. Like literally build wise and everything, but he's just more athletic and is heavier. So people talk about him being short and everything like that. Joe Thuney was as well, but again, Brandon Coleman is just a way better athlete in every way possible, and he's heavier than Joe Thuney. So he tested way better than him, way quicker, way faster, way more explosive with more weight. Literally, basically like technically a higher ceiling Joe Thuney. But that's really your pathway to being a great left tackle while even being short for the position at his height. And I know people hear higher ceiling Joe Thuney and of course think that it's ridiculous, but I prefer again to do my ceiling comps based off of like size, weight, height, length, athletic traits, and play style of what they could eventually potentially be if everything goes correctly. I acknowledge the fact that there is a very slim chance that he ever reaches that ceiling. Very, very slim chance. But what's the fun in trying to find a humble comp for him, a super safe comp of what he may be today versus what he could be eventually become? And I really feel like this just gets my point across as far as like his ceiling. This is what he can be. Just imagine this guy if he reaches his potential to become this. I just feel like that's more fun to talk about anyway. And I also feel like realistic and really humble comps are also overcrowded. I feel like most people do those types of comps, so I kind of like to, you know, provide a little bit something different. I don't think anybody else has ever compared Brandon Coleman to Joe Thuney, so I just felt like this would be, you know, a fun thing to kind of throw out there, another name to attach his name to. Everybody else is saying more super humble, more realistic things, but again, what's the fun in that? Like, what really is the more fun in that? Now, moving on, Adam Peters also said it himself after the draft that the Washington Commanders believe that Brandon Coleman, quote, has everything it takes to be a tackle in this league, unquote. And he didn't say which side, though. He didn't specify left tackle, but that's just me messing with Adam Peters because he didn't say left tackle. He just said a tackle. And then, of course, if it's a right tackle, that's like an easier projection rather than left tackle. That's a harder projection. But either way, that's just me more so messing with Adam Peters. But in the team announcement of the pick, with the picture of Brandon Coleman and all the graphic, the editing, all of that type of stuff, it says offensive tackle. So the message is clear. When Adam Peters drafted this guy, he told the Washington Commanders media team, their social media team or the marketing team, whatever, that he's a tackle. So when you post them, say tackle Brandon Coleman. And then Dane Brugler said this about him. He said Coleman needs to improve his technical consistency, but his ease of movement, spatial awareness, and length are the building blocks that offensive line coaches covet. He has the traits to stay outside at tackle while also offering position flexibility at guard. Then CBS gave us an A for drafting Brandon Coleman 67th overall. They said big, girthy, offensive tackle, let's emphasize that, who probably kicks in at guard at the next level. Measurables are impressive, and he's a special mover for his size. Weapon at the second level because of that combination. Burst and finishing ability as well. Can recover, and handwork is polished. Lateral quickness is a bit slow at times. I love this pick for Washington after Daniels in round 1. Grade A. And then the Athletic gave us a B+. They said it took far too long, but the Commanders finally landed an offensive tackle. A former junior college player, Coleman started 34 games at TCU with 22 of those coming at left tackle. Blessed with long arms, 34 and 7/8 inch arms, and good size, 6'4", 313 pounds, Coleman might get pressed into service earlier than he's ready, but he can eventually develop into a solid starting tackle. Emphasis on tackle. And then Greg Williams literally earlier today said, quote, I think it's a home run that Adam and Dan were able to get Brandon Coleman at 67. I thought he was going to go much earlier. This guy's a tough guy, unquote. Again, that's Greg Williams himself. Who else can you believe? And then also, Pro Football Focus said, quote, Coleman is an ideal developmental offensive line prospect with high percentile athleticism and measurables that present a starting caliber ceiling in the NFL with improved fundamentals. He's just fairly raw, but we can work on that. And then Brandon Thorne said, this is a draft analyst, he said, one of my guys in this class that I would love to bet on at the end of day 2 and especially early day 3 is Brandon Coleman. This is before the draft even happened, days before the draft. As most know by now, the 2022 tape is better than the 2023 tape, but at his best, there were shades of Cordy Glenn. And I do want to emphasize the fact that, yeah, his 2022 tape was better than the 2023 tape because 2022, they let him play left tackle the entire season. 2023, they got frisky and wanted to try him at guard for a few games, and then they found out it didn't necessarily work out. By the time they moved him back to tackle, he wasn't as good of a tackle as he was. Just play him at tackle and keep him there. Also, shouts out to the Cordy Glenn comp. I love that. That's Riverdale's own right there. You know what I'm saying? And he went to UGA as well, but he's from Riverdale. Shouts out Riverdale, man. Yes, sir, man. That's South Atlanta stuff right there. Also, Nick Attridge of Pro Football Focus said this about Brandon Coleman. He said, good job maintaining blocks, always looks to finish. Powerful hands. If he gets a grasp, it's over. I mean, what else can you ask of an offensive tackle right there? Snatch trap God. Another positive trait. Then the two negatives. Vulnerable to getting his hands swiped away quickly and needs to clean up his footwork. All of that is coachable. The other 3 traits, the great elite traits that like in the positives, It's really hard to teach those, man. It's easier to teach him to learn how to deal with counters and to also clean up his footwork. I feel like, in my personal opinion, but I'm not an offensive lines coach. Maybe I'm wrong, but I just feel like this guy's the definition of having things you can't teach or that are more difficult to teach, and the things that he need to work on are things that coaches can easily perfect and polish at the NFL level. So I'm very optimistic about this pick working out, and people in a couple of years being like, how did this guy even make it to the 3rd round? And remember, the interest here was clear even before the draft because he came in for a top 30 visit, so we're not surprised that we ended up taking him in the 3rd round. I'm surprised that we waited that long and even took a chance on him potentially getting drafted before our 67th overall pick. And now let's look at the relative athletic score, because you know we got to do that. Just to let you know, his 9.96 relative athletic score, elite out of 10, y'all, out of 10, ranked 7th out of 1,583 offensive linemen, guard specifically, though. This is his relative athletic score if he were to play guard, even though I see him as a tackle. We're going to dive into that throughout the rest of this video. But either way, if you project him as a guard, this is 7th out of 1,583 guards to ever be drafted into the NFL since 1987, y'all. That's ridiculous. Explosion, elite. Speed, elite. Agility, elite. And if we're talking about height, but this is guard again, the height is good. It's not as bad as if you actually project him at tackle. Matter of fact, projecting him at tackle, if you want to do that, as you see on the screen, he's still a 9.70. Now, the height is in red, but the weight is still good. That's still yellow. The height, of course, decreases his relative athletic score. But when we're talking about explosion, speed, and agility, he's still ridiculous, y'all. I mean, running a 4.99 at 313 pounds, absolutely insane. And then having a 34-inch vertical, carrying 313 pounds of weight is absolutely insane, along with that broad jump. Come on now. Y'all gotta see it. I mean, you're looking at the same screen that I'm looking at right now. The arm length is great as well. I wish we threw arm length into the composite side grading when it comes to these relative athletic scores, because his arm length is great. I feel like his arm length is actually like one of the better of this entire draft class out of even just the tackles, not even just the guards. And I feel like his relative athletic score would be higher if you also included arm length into the calculations. His wingspan is 88th percentile out of all offensive linemen. We're not just talking about guards, centers, everybody, including tackles. His wingspan is 88th percentile, and I believe that's out of the entire NFL, not even just this draft class. So I know his height is a little short, but I'm not really worried about that, me personally. And remember, Mr. Relative Athletic Score creator himself, at MathBomb, said that the Commanders had the most athletic 2024 draft class in the entire NFL, and Brandon Coleman was still the most athletic guy, the highest score out of all of those guys. That's ridiculous. I mean, and then you also have this chart right here. This chart tells you everything you need to know, because I love how they even have Jayden Daniels' athleticism scaled and calculated, since relative athletic score couldn't really scale it because Jayden Daniels didn't do any testing. So it's completely based on testing. Next Gen Stats does it completely based on how they move on tape and things like that. They dive even deeper. So even after you add Jayden Daniels, the crazy athlete himself, to our chart of elite athletes from this draft class, Brandon Coleman is still the most athletic. And don't forget, the Next Gen Stats had Jordan McGee, that you see on the screen, as the most athletic linebacker in this entire draft class. And it's a very freaky linebacker class. And look how more athletic Brandon Coleman is, even more than him. And then also, don't forget that Ben Sinnott had like the best testing numbers at like 3 different things at the combine out of the entire 2024 draft tight end class. And then Luke McCaffrey had the best short shuttle and the second best 3-cone out of all receivers in this entire draft class as well. And Brandon Coleman is still considered that much more of an athlete than those guys. It's absolutely ridiculous. And to dive even deeper, Brandon Coleman has an impressive 35-inch vertical, like we already talked about. He regularly runs 18 miles per hour on film, like on tape, on the field. We're not talking about the combine when nobody has any pads on, no helmet, all of that stuff restricting you. We're talking about in game, he regularly reaches up to 18 miles per hour, 313 pounds. He also squats 600 pounds, benches 400, and power cleans 375 pounds. And he was a team captain, which of course tells you, that follows the whole leadership thing, that whole trend with Dan Quinn and Adam Peters they're looking for. But come on, dog, that type type of athlete is absolutely insane, man. Squats 600 pounds, benches 400, power cleans 375, 35-inch vertical, and runs up to 18 miles per hour at 313 pounds. I mean, I don't know what more do y'all want from a guy, man. And his arms are really long, so I'm not worried about the height, me personally. And Mitch Tisler also brings up a couple of great points. He said on Twitter, think about it this way. Brandon Coleman is 6'4", has 35-inch long arms, and a 35-inch vertical. That means he can almost touch the top of an NBA backboard. Oh, by the way, he weighs 313 pounds. The more I let this pick settle in, the more I like it. The elite athleticism plays a big part. He also said, I like the Brandon Coleman pick. You can see a pattern with AP and this front office. Coleman has the measurables to be an NFL tackle, but has the experience also playing a guard as well. We'll be interested to see how this group develops guys who have experience at multiple positions. I completely agree with all of that. The elite athleticism is what makes you very excited about him. I think the tape is better than what people give it credit for, but the ceiling is ridiculous. And to speak to that fact, even outside of the freak athleticism and the very high ceiling, he's not just a freak athlete. He was also a productive tackle as well. His career pass blocking stats are 1,307 pass blocking snaps in total, right? 54 quarterback pressures allowed out of 1,307 snaps and only 3 sacks allowed. So we're talking about a freak athlete with a very high ceiling, but we're also talking about a very productive player in college. And specifically last season-wise, 0 sacks allowed in 2023 on 429 pass blocking snaps. If he cannot give up any sacks at the NFL level, what more can we really ask for from a guy like this? We already know he's strong based off of the stats I just gave you on what he weight lifts and power cleans and all that type of stuff. But pass protection-wise, if he doesn't give up any sacks, or is at the very least one of the best tackles in the NFL and not giving up sacks, even if he does give up a couple, what more can we ask for? And just in case if you're wondering, 22 of his 26 starts over the last 2 years came at left tackle. Also, he started at left tackle in 2022, played mostly left tackle in 2023, but moved around as TCU took advantage of his versatility. And just a deeper dive into that, started all 15 games at left tackle in 2022, but in 2023 started 11 games, and first 4 were left guard, and the last 7 were left tackle. So that's the type of stuff that easily stifles your development, man. Again, the Commanders also see him as a left tackle type of guy, but maybe they utilize his versatility some as well. I mean, it's there because with his athleticism at guard, Cosme and Coleman could be the most athletic guard duo in the entire NFL just based off of their relative athletic scores and based off of how they move on tape and things like that as well. But I honestly prefer him to just go ahead and pick one position, just stay there and have him stick to that position from here on out and develop him towards that. The way he eats, the way he practices, the drills he goes through, the coaches that he's talking to, the things that he prioritizes during practice, work on this, work on that. I want all of that to be, we picked the position today and he moves forward with that. It sounds like from Adam Peters's point of view, it's tackle. Well, fine. Put him at tackle. Master one position rather than being like a jack of all trades of multiple and things like that. Remember the whole positional flex that Ron Rivera and those guys kept preaching, where we had a bunch of guys that were decent at multiple things but never great at any particular thing? I want to avoid that. But hey, man, Mr. Senior Bowl himself, Jim Nagy, loves Coleman at guard. Before the draft, he actually tweeted, he said, been tons of talk about this year's offensive tackle and center classes, but there's also some quality guard prospects that scouts feel could start immediately day one, week one. One name that came up repeatedly in convos with NFL teams since the Senior Bowl is TCU's guard / tackle Brandon Coleman. 34 starts past 3 years, team captain, proven position flex, good tape at both left guard and left tackle, elite testing, excellent size and measurements. Teams have also told us that Brandon Coleman has been extremely impressive in pre-draft interviews, which isn't surprising based on how TCU football staff talked about him back in August when we visited Fort Worth. Coleman's best friend is fellow Senior Bowl alumni and Rams all-rookie guard center Steve Avila, and scouts we've spoken with feel Coleman has the same high level of maturity and to transition quickly to the NFL like Steve Avila did, so can play immediately week one. Good rep here showing Coleman's length and hand strength versus potential first rounder Brandon Frisk, and he shows clips at the Senior Bowl of Brandon Coleman doing a great job against Brandon Frisk, one of the freakier athletes out of the entire draft, regardless of position. But again, I personally think no matter what his ceiling is at guard, and we're still gonna, flip-flop back and forth between guard and tackle, but just know, from my point of view, I think he can go out there and ball out at tackle, man. I think he could be a really good starting left tackle, and I know he may be short, but his arms are very long, and he's a freak athlete, so I think he's good to go. He's very strong as well. I'm not worried about that at all. Very mobile. I feel like technique-wise, he can improve on his footwork, but like his footwork physically, what he was naturally born with, I feel like is more than enough to play tackle. And I prefer my starting left tackle to be short with very long arms far more than I prefer for them to be tall with very short arms any day of the week. So give me a Brandon Coleman type of guy. Way more prefer short, long arms than tall, short arms any day, please. And maybe his highest ceiling is at left guard. Just say it is. But I'm telling you, man, if Adam Peters thinks he's a really good tackle, I do as well. And shouts out to Ian Cummins for bringing this point up as well. For Commanders fans, my scouting report on Brandon Coleman is below. He has the link to it and everything. I'd always projected him to guard, but I do think he has the size and athleticism to start at left tackle and be very good there. Still very early in his football career, lots of upside to unearth. And he said in his breakdown, he has legitimate tackle capabilities and will always provide security there, but his ceiling is even higher at guard. With his natural leverage acquisition, high-octane athleticism, complete power profile, strength, and ability to stay square, Coleman can be an early NFL starter at guard, and he has true scheme versatile impact starter upside if he can build on his foundation. But my logic is, even if his highest ceiling is at guard, just say it is, even if he can also be a great tackle, go ahead and play him at tackle. First of all, we don't need a guard like we need tackle. Like, that's first and foremost when you're looking at the roster. But also, positional value-wise, even if, for example, he's a future Hall of Famer at guard, just for a scenario, but a multi-Pro Bowler at left tackle, but not necessarily a Hall of Famer, there's still more value in him playing at tackle. And third, with how well he played at tackle in 2022, but with how much he struggled in 2023, where he played some guard, he played some tackle, and he was all over the place, you could also argue, in my opinion, just based off of that he may have a higher floor at tackle as well. Because when they played him at guard, he struggled. When they played him at tackle, he looked like a future first or second round pick 2 years ago. So higher ceiling at guard? Maybe, but for sure a higher floor at tackle, and tackle is a far more premium position, which is my main point. An offense can function way easier with a bad guard than it can a bad tackle. You have a bad tackle, it's a wrap, basically. And even if his ceiling at guard is actually higher at guard than instead of tackle, and say if we had holes at both guard and tackle, then yeah, maybe go ahead and groom him to be an elite guard. But since we have so many serviceable guards here, so many good, dependable, and probably you can even argue at least one great guard that can maybe step in at left guard for us, and we already have right guard settled in Samuel Cosmi, and we technically don't have any like very dependable starting left tackles right now. We are hoping that right now Brandon Coleman can play tackle at the very least. I hope he proves everybody wrong that views him as more of a guard. But again, him and Cosmi could make up the most athletic guard duo in the NFL, so that's exciting. That's our highest ceiling combination right there, of course. But then we would just need to find somebody that can protect Jayden Daniels' blind side. And but hey, man, I'm rooting for him to go excel at left tackle, please, and as soon as possible, so that we can stop worrying about it, man, please. But also, please do not flip him back and forth like the Commanders did with Samuel Cosmi 2 years ago. Anything but that. That stifled his development immensely, man. Immensely. Please pick a spot and keep him there as long as you possibly can. No game by game changes and experiments like they did with Samuel Cosmi 2 years ago. I feel like, yeah, play him at guard, play him at tackle. Those are all way better options than trying to play them both back and forth. Like, we've already seen how that worked out terribly in 2023 at TCU. That's literally worst case scenario to me. Like, compared to that, the guard and tackle debate is trivial. Plays anything but trying to give them and force them to go out there and do both. I'm not gonna lie, especially if you see him as a starter. If you see him as a potential backup, which is, I mean, why would you see him as that if you take him in the third round? Then cool, you could play him and both give him experiences both. But if you see him as a future really good starter at either guard or tackle, you play him at one of those and you keep him there for as long as you can, hopefully for the rest of his career. And Brandon Coleman was even asked where he'd prefer to play, and as you'd expect, he gave an open-minded answer saying, quote, "I don't really have a preference. I'm just excited to get to the Commanders, to the NFL," unquote. Of course, his answer was going to be very political, very open-minded. Wherever they want me, that's where they can put me. But I'm pretty sure he even knows, if you truly ask him, like you ask one of his closest friends or family, and they get like behind the scenes and ask him straight up, would you actually prefer to play? He'd say tackle. Even outside of just the fact that you can make more money at tackle, but also that's where he's played the best on tape. You can say his highest ceiling is at guard, but on tape, he's been a far better tackle than he's been a guard. Watch out for that training camp battle between Cornelius Lucas, Trent Scott, and Brandon Coleman, unless we go sign another veteran tackle. Because now, of course, best case scenario is Brandon Coleman is ready to start week 1, already ready to go out there and ball out immediately. But I'm not sure if that's the most likely scenario, and I fully expect Coleman to take over at left tackle at some point this upcoming rookie season in 2024, but we'll see if he can do it by week 1. I'm not very sure about it. I mean, we'll have to see where his development is in training camp and preseason and things like that. Just let you know, week 1 is not as far as you think. That's a lot of development for a guy to go through to be able to be ready to start at left tackle in the NFL, man. Going against the elite edge rushers that you got to go against on a weekly basis at the NFL level that he did not necessarily have to go against that often in college. And also, shouts out to Burgundy Blog for pointing this out to further back my point that this short height shouldn't stop him from being a great tackle. You can see this on the screen. This is Brandon Coleman's relative athletic score at tackle specifically compared to Trent Williams. And you notice that Brandon Coleman has the higher athletic score. You notice that maybe he's 2 pounds lighter, and maybe he's like a tiny bit of a hair, like a centimeter shorter, basically. But everything else, he's basically generally better at. And that's why his relative athletic score came out higher. The only thing is, we didn't get a bench for him. But again, I already gave you the stats as to why I'm not worried about his strength at all. And I feel like if you throw his bench in there, his relative athletic score would be even higher. It'll probably go into the 9.8s at tackle. Burgundy Blog, while also providing this visual for you, he said, when an offensive tackle prospect, quote, might be a guard, unquote, I tend to assume he'll eventually settle at guard. But looking into Coleman, not even sure I understand the skepticism, because he played both, right? Because he's only shy of 6'5". Guy only allowed 1 sack last year, has long arms and tested like a freak. And again, according to Pro Football Focus, he technically didn't allow any sacks last year. But either way, Burgundy Blog is bringing up a great point that, hey man, if you're looking at Trent Williams and he turned out to be a great tackle at the NFL level, and I'm not saying that Brandon Coleman is going to be Trent Williams. That's not even necessarily my comp for him, but I'm telling you, I'm showing you that by comping him to Joe Tooney, the All-Pro, and also comparing his relative athletic score directly to Trent Williams, I'm just like, where's all of this hate towards him being a starting left tackle coming from? That's just my point. So also moving on, there's also a lot of people's opinions that I really trust that feel like he can for sure play tackle. Let's run through those. Brandon Thorne, he said he graded Coleman as a tackle. My dog Jamal at Let Maul Tell It. Make sure you follow him on Twitter, YouTube, everywhere, man. He said putting out a film session on Commanders left tackle Brandon Coleman in the next day or so. I like a lot of his traits. Foot quickness, hand usage, and independent usage. Strike time and placement. Can keep chest clean in engagements. AP's projection to left tackle makes sense for me. And this is a guy that lives, breathes, and sleeps all 22 film sessions and all of that type of stuff. That's literally what he does for Hogs Haven. Shouts out to my boy Jamal at Let Maul Tell It. Make sure you follow him. Remember, that's the account, that's the YouTube page, and I mean, great reporting that they did where they got the Adam Schefter breaking news. Go ahead and buy your jerseys. Then they had RG3, they had Louis Riddick on and everything. They are going crazy. Make sure you follow him because he does a lot of film breakdowns. And then also Logan Paulson, who's played in the NFL for many years. Film guy, if you've ever met one, said, quote, he has the size, athleticism, and feel in his reps there to make you think he can do it at left tackle. Graded way better in 2022 per Pro Football Focus when played at left tackle than he did in 2023 splitting time. I completely agree there. And then also my boy Trevor Sikkema, Buccaneers fan, but like just a pure draft analyst, that's what he does. When he was talking about Brandon Coleman, he said, quote, one of the best developmental tackle prospects in this entire draft. Coleman has the talent to be a starting left tackle in this league, but it might take a while, unquote. And I'm not mad at that. But I'm just trying to prove to you that these guys that know football, that know the draft, that know traits, that know college football, and what it takes to transition from being an offensive lineman in college to going to the NFL level, all of these guys agree that he should be a left tackle at the position if you want him to be. If you want to play him a guard, cool, but he can play tackle if that's what you want him to do. And honestly, me personally, again, if I had to pick one game for you to watch to convince you that he can be a great tackle at the NFL level, it's the national championship game against my Georgia Bulldogs from a couple of years ago. The season that he played tackle the entire season, where he had his best Pro Football Focus grade out of his entire career in college. The year that was literally the best tape that he's put out there in 2022. All he played left tackle in the championship game against my Georgia Bulldogs. You can argue he had a perfect game in pass protection. He allowed 0 sacks, 0 hits, 0 hurries, and 0 pressures. Absolutely nothing against that dominant Georgia defense that went on to put out a lot of first-round picks. And he had an 89.8 pass blocking grade. And again, this was the national championship game against Georgia's elite defense. Mind you, the Georgia Bulldogs defensive line is that same one that sent several first round picks to the NFL in the 2022 and 2023 NFL drafts. The same one where Trayvon Walker went #1 overall. Devontae Wyatt went in the first round to the Packers. We can keep going. Jordan Davis, all of these guys. We can keep going and going and going. That same defensive line that had all of the my boy Jalen Carter now in the Eagles was a rotational piece in that 2022 championship that those guys had to go up against. That defensive line, he had arguably the perfect pass blocking game. So you see the ceiling, you see the potential against elite players in the time when they need them the most, the championship. Even though, I mean, we straight up drugged them boys, you know what I'm saying? We did them filthy over there. Them boys was hot dog water out there as a team. But hey, man, that's neither here nor there. That wasn't Brandon Coleman's fault, I'll tell you that. And lastly, if you don't want to believe me or any of these professional analysts that I just gave you, how about a professional offensive lines coach in his expert opinion? He said Brandon Coleman's 2023 tape was a little up and down as he battled through ankle and knee issues. So a lot of it, he's pointing out the fact that Brandon Coleman was hurt a little bit. And that's why he struggled. Not only was it the positional switch between guard and tackle within the same season, but also he was dealing with some leg injuries, multiple of them, ankle and knees. Despite his injuries, he started all but one game this season, which speaks to his toughness. So you also got a guy that even if he's banged up, even if he's hurt a little bit, he's gonna go out there and still give you all that he has and be available as much as he possibly can. And I'm really hoping that he works out, because people are already talking about replacing him in the first round with Jayden Daniels' teammate, actually, from LSU, his starting left tackle from LSU. And when you're doing these way too early 2025 mock drafts, pretty much everybody has us selected high in the first round, a tackle, and it's usually more times than not Jayden Daniels' teammate from LSU. So I really hope this works out, man. And even though I'm a big fan of Brandon Coleman and believe in his potential, and also, even though all of the veteran left tackles that are available right now in free agency have red flags, I would still sign one of them to a very cheap deal. This third wave of free agency is way less active than I expected. There's still some guys out there. Remember, we signed Josh Norman after the draft. It's not like you still can't go out there and get a real, like, strong contributor to your team. I know the Josh Norman thing didn't necessarily work out, even though I feel like that was more so bad scheme, bad fit than Josh Norman himself. But whatever. I mean, you know, I want Justin Simmons real bad. He's still out there. I'm still holding out hope that we get him, but we still need to address left tackle, in my opinion, at least like week 1 through week 4 or 5 starter. That's basically what I'm saying. You have DJ Humphries, Donovan Smith. They're both low ceiling guys that aren't that great, decent starters, but at least, you know, they can force Cornelius Lucas to go back into his better suited backup swing tackle role and give Brandon Coleman time to not have to rush his development and potentially develop any bad habits. They're not great starting left tackles, but they'll do. And I prefer Cornelius Lucas as a backup swing tackle, not just starter. So I'll be down to sign DJ Humphries or Donovan Smith for very, very cheap. But I mean, they're not very good, but you can at least hope for them to play more games than a David Bakhtiari. But at the same time, David Bakhtiari, when available, and that's a huge win though, is still an all-pro left tackle. Like in the 4 games he plays in a season, he's still going out there and balling out. He's still arguably the best pass protector in the entire NFL right now. Even just last year he was, according to Pro Football Focus, he had the highest pass blocking grade out of any tackle in the entire NFL, even though he barely played. But again, you gotta hope that he at least gives you 6 games until at least Brandon Coleman is ready to go out there and start for you. But if you ask me, I prefer the high-end talent on an incentive-based contract like the Jets gave Tyron Smith over the DJ Humphries and the Donovan Smith. Give me David Bakhtiari, where you only give him like a $6 million cap hit worth of type of deal, and then he can earn more money based on how many games he plays. Win-win for everybody. I mean, and with how injury prone he's been these last few years, it's actually been kind of blown out of proportion a little bit. Because he played 1 game last year, yeah, but he played 11 games last year, the year before. He played 1 game the year before that, and then 12 games the year before that. And then he played every single game possible the year before that and the year before that as well. So based off of his last 4 years, yeah, that's where he's been injury prone. But he's still due to have at least a double-digit game this season, just based off of the fact that last year 1 game, the year before that double digits, year before that 1 game, the year before that double digits. So if we're just following that trend, this upcoming year he should be able to give us double-digit games. Plus, I remember seeing from somewhere, I forgot which football player it was. It's somebody currently in the NFL, but they said that like David Bakhtiari right now looks the best health-wise and injury-proof-wise than he's looked in at least the past few years. They feel like this is finally like the offseason where he's really sat down and really got himself back to 100% rather than coming back like maybe 80-something or 90%, and that's what's led to those injuries that he keeps sustaining in these past few years. So my point is, hey man, get me the higher ceiling tackle, the guy that's still an all-pro right now, if when healthy, big win, and then hopefully he can give us at least enough games until Brandon Coleman is ready to go out there and start. And I feel like that's a huge win for Jayden Daniels and the Commanders, because that's an all-pro right there protecting his blind side. I mean, say he only plays 1 to 4 games. I mean, that's still better than forcing Brandon Coleman to go out there and play for you week 1, or throwing Cornelius Lucas out there week 1. Because I like Cornelius Lucas, but I feel like there is a reason that Charles Leno was starting over him. And you can't convince me that somehow Adam Peters and those guys like Cornelius Lucas as a starting left tackle more than Ron Rivera and them did. I refuse to believe that. So I'm pretty sure they're behind the scenes cooking something up, and they're maybe just waiting until we get into rookie mini camps, maybe mandatory mini camps, maybe even training camp, to see where everybody is in their development, to make sure that Brandon Coleman isn't ready. And then and if he's still looking raw at training camp, or at least until a certain point in training camp, then maybe they'll go and get him. But I highly doubt we just jump the gun and go and get a David Bakhtiari right now, instead of giving Brandon Coleman a chance to show us that he can be a starting left tackle immediately day 1. And so again, out of those 3 vets, between DJ Humphries and Donovan Smith, David Bakhtiari, give me David Bakhtiari, and just hope that he's still playing at an all-pro level. Again, just played an all-pro level last year, so I think he's good to go. We have the 2nd most cap space in the NFL. To me, why not? I can see why they would wait until maybe like training camp, but I would just go ahead and sign him today, me personally. And again, he's probably out looking for a job right now. I know he's injury prone, but again, Tyron Smith got to deal with the Jets to where he's making $6 million guaranteed. That's the cap hit. And then he can earn up to $20 million based on how many games he plays. Give that literally to David Bakhtiari, in my opinion. I mean, you just spent a 2nd overall pick in the 1st round on a franchise quarterback. Why would you throw him out there without being sure about your left tackle position right now? I just don't see it. So we'll see. Unless Brandon Coleman goes out there and is further ahead in his development than we expect, I'm expecting us to go contact one of those tackles, especially since they're still available right now. Maybe there's no serious market out there for them, and maybe everybody's thinking the same thing. Let's see what our rookies are looking like right now, our young guys, and then maybe we'll contact one of those guys. But I don't think we necessarily have to worry about David Bakhtiari getting signed before we potentially may need him. And of course, also want to talk about the fact that, yeah, in the draft, when it comes to Brandon Coleman, a lot of people were saying that he was a reach and things like that. Why did we wait until the 3rd round to get a tackle? Well, first of all, Adam Peters told you, and there's been several reports from a lot of trustworthy people, like the top draft guys, the top reporters, all saying that Adam Peters tried, but everybody that he tried to talk to were basically trying to try to take advantage of us and ask for more than they normally would because they knew we were desperate for a tackle. And I respect and really appreciate the fact that Adam Peters was not desperate enough to give up more value than what was actually necessary to trade up just to get a left tackle. I would love to have a starting left tackle. I felt like walking into the draft, walking away with Jayden Daniels and Amarius Mims was the best case scenario by far. But hey man, what can you do when no team is giving you at least a reasonable deal to potentially trade up? And so now also beyond that, of course, there is the top tier of tackles like Joe Alt, J.C. Latham, Olu Fashanu, Troy Fatanu, and Amarius Mims. You can also throw the Talise Fawaga guy in there if you want to, as far as like the top tier guys. But outside of that, Brandon Coleman is in the same tier, in my opinion, and even better than a lot of those guys that ended up going before Brandon Coleman in the draft. So I feel like we got better value. Like, I like Brandon Sillen over Jordan Morgan's Sillen easily, and Jordan Morgan went in the first round. I like Brandon Coleman more than, or just at the very least, as much as everybody else left. Like Tyler Guyton, because of Brandon Coleman Sillen, I prefer Brandon Coleman Sillen there easily. Patrick Paul, because of Brandon Coleman's floor and arguably Sillen. Blake Fisher, just straight up, I like Brandon Coleman more than Blake Fisher, just period. Roger Rosengarten because of Sillen. Kingsley Samataya because of Coleman's floor easily. Right now, Brandon Coleman is more ready to play. And we can even debate about Sillen because Brandon Coleman had the higher relative athletic score. And if we're talking about Sillens as well, if we're just talking about who could end up being the best tackles out of this entire draft class, and if they all reach their Sillens, we have J.C. Latham, Joe Alt, Fashanu, Mims, Kingsley, and Coleman really in their own tier by themselves, in my personal opinion. And with all of that, in my opinion, Brandon Coleman going after everybody I just named that we've just talked about in these past few minutes, I feel like ended up really being a steal. And we're going to look back years from now and we're going to be like, yeah, that was a steal. Because again, I just felt like there's no need to be desperate and take a tackle too early. Since we couldn't trade up, don't try to take like a Tyler Guyton or like especially like a Jordan Morgan in the second round. It's not worth it. Take Brandon Coleman in the third. I felt like that was the right answer. I felt like Adam Peters hit that out the park. Again, in my opinion, after we missed out on Joe Alt, J.C. Latham, Olu Fashanu, Amarius Mims, and Troy Fatanu, I feel like we might as well wait until late as possible to get a tackle. I love the fact that Adam Peters did not feel desperate to the point where we reached on tackle because it's just simply our biggest needs. Like, take the best players available, and then once we get to that second or third tier of tackle, you might as well draft the best one available then, no matter really, into my opinion, what position we're at, especially second and third round wise, and then get the higher ceiling tackle later on as late as you can. And Adam Peters not only did that, but also managed to get one of the highest ceiling tackles out of this entire draft class in the third round. I personally felt like he made the best decision in the situation, especially after teams were trying to overcharge us to trade up for tackle. And I feel like it's really slept on that he does have a higher floor than several of the tackles taken before him. I don't know why people keep acting like Brandon Coleman just is this extremely raw guy compared to guys like Patrick Paul and Kingsley Samataya who got taken before him. So, hey man, shouts out to all of the teams that took other tackles instead of Brandon Coleman, because hey man, I think that's going to end up being a gift for us. I feel like him falling into our lap there is going to be a steal when we look back years from now. And I can also see a lot of people that feel like this draft class will be judged largely on if Brandon Coleman works out or not. And I like Brandon Coleman a lot, but that is true. I can see that. Even as much as I agree, if you don't find a way to protect Jayden Daniels' blind spot, this draft class may look a little crazy. Even with all of the steals we got at other positions, man, that's gonna look a little crazy when that's obviously your biggest need outside of quarterback coming into the draft. And especially the fact that that quarterback that was your biggest need coming into the draft, the guy that you just drafted second overall, if Brandon Coleman doesn't look good, it's going to negatively affect Jayden Daniels in a big way. So I am a little concerned, but I'm very high on Brandon Coleman. I'm excited. Dane Brugler said Brandon Coleman was one of my favorite picks in the entire draft. He was a little bit of a discount because he was banged up. So he's saying that we only got him in the third round because he was hurt. To get him in the third round is good value. And also moving on, I'm hoping that our run on third-round picks continue with the new regime, because the fact that we got Brandon Coleman and Luke McCaffrey as well, because we had pretty good third-round pick luck even with the previous regime that couldn't draft that well in general. Remember, we got Brian Robinson, 2022 version of Benjamin St. Juste to be specific, Antonio Gibson in flashes, and Terry McLaurin all in the third round just within the last 4 years, not including this 2024 draft because we haven't seen these guys play yet. And also, don't forget, most importantly, with the Broncos, Adam Peters found all-pro safety Justin Simmons in the third round for the Denver Broncos when he was one of their top draft guys. And with the 49ers, he found three-time all-pro linebacker Fred Warner in the third round. And starting guard in Spencer in the fourth round. And then four-time all-pro tight end George Kittle and all-pro safety Talanoa Hufanga and star linebacker Dre Greenlaw all in the fifth round. And also Brock Purdy in the seventh. So if there's any GM I'm going to trust to find some great players in rounds where you don't typically expect to find them, it's Adam Peters. Give him the benefit of the doubt, please, y'all. Do not be too quick to hate this pick until you at least see this guy on the field. Please. I'm not saying that Adam Peters is going to hit on every third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh rounder he ever drafts, but at least give Brandon Coleman some time to go out there and show us what he can and what he can't do. But yeah, man, that's the end of this video. Please get in the comment section. Let me know how you feel about everything discussed in this video. I did not expect this video to end up being this long. I'm not gonna lie. I didn't expect for Brandon Coleman to be my longest video so far out of all of our draft picks. I did not expect that going in at all, but there were a lot of points to prove. We pretty much had to talk about him at two separate positions, so really if you divide it in half, technically he's 25 minutes each in a way, even though I didn't actually split it up exactly like that. But either way, man, make sure you please do not leave this video without leaving a like, and of course let me know in the comment section how you feel about this entire breakdown. Do you agree or disagree with any of my points? Do you have any points that I didn't think of, any stats that I didn't think of? Of course let me know in the comment section, do you feel like he can start at tackle, or do you feel like we just need to go ahead and throw him in at guard and figure out tackle some other way? Let me know how you feel about this whole situation. I'm gonna try to read and reply to as many comments as possible. Of course I've been busy, but I'm gonna try my best. And of course make sure you stay tuned, because of course now we're on to the next draft picks that I got to get to. So now we're on to Ben Sinnott. We got my boy Mike Sanford still in Michigan after that, and then Johnny Newton to finish up the draft class. Then I'm gonna start doing film sessions on everybody. I got to do an overall draft grade and review as well. I have a lot of live streams planned for y'all. I have a lot of more interesting videos and projections and things like that. So make sure you stay tuned for all of the content. Again, I have so many ideas. No excuse for me not to at least be coming out with 2-3 videos a day. It's not a lack of ideas. It's always about a lack of time to be able to get these videos done and out to y'all. So I really appreciate y'all. Appreciate y'all staying patient with me. I'm gonna catch y'all later. I'm out.